Hello, my name is Mike Gravel, and I have an unusual guest with me today in the Senate studio. That's a person who's been very much in the news for the very simple reason that he has a very, very important position next to the most powerful man on earth. That's Hamilton Jordan, who's the assistant, the primary assistant to Jimmy Carter, the President of the United States. Ham, I want to tell you I'm happy to have you here as my guest and appreciate it.
Thanks, Senator. It's good to be here.
Good. I think Alaskans would be really interested to get a feel for how things are run in the inner sanctum. And obviously, you know, I don't expect to release any privacies, but just to get a feel how our government operates at the highest level. But before I go into that, I'd just like to get a feel is, how did you meet Jimmy Carter, and did you have any idea that you'd wind up right in the White House?
Obviously not. I'm sure he probably is surprised to be in the White House as I am to be there, probably more so. In 1966, Jimmy Carter was a state senator, and the governor's race opened up, and at the really 11th hour, he jumped into the Democratic race for governor of Georgia. And during that same summer, I was working. I was out of college, and happened to meet him and began to work as a student in his campaign in '66. He lost that primary to Lester Maddox, who went on and became governor of Georgia. But Jimmy at that point decided that he was going to be governor of Georgia, and began working right after that '66 defeat to be governor of Georgia. And then I continued my relationship with him into the governor's office, and then he had this crazy idea that he wanted to be president, and so I continued to work with him then, and that's how we got here.
Did you think you would do it when he first approached you with the idea that let's go all the way to the presidency? Did you think it was doable at that point?
Yeah, I never, it was difficult for us to even contemplate or talk about. It was almost embarrassing for us to say the words. It was embarrassing for him to talk about it because it was such an enormous undertaking. But at the same time, we had a can-do attitude about the venture. We knew that other candidates that would be running would be better known than Jimmy Carter. But we knew that it was a big country, but it was as big for them as it was for us. We had some natural advantages. He was out of office. He could devote full time to campaigning. He was a good campaigner. He understood the mood of the country. He, on most issues, was compatible with the wishes of the American people. So it was, on one hand, an enormous undertaking that required a lot of skill and a good bit of luck. But on the other hand, we had a sense that we could do it, and that we'd work as long and as hard and as effectively as anyone else that was running. And that's the same attitude that he's brought to government. That's in terms of dealing with some of these tough issues. He's trying to do things that people have told him can't be done.
In talking about the methodology of the man, what little contact I've had with him, I view him, and for my own purposes, I use the word ascetic. And in political terms, I view it that he's the toughest person I've ever met. I mean, the self-discipline, the methodicalness, that he can just walk on fire and not flinch and just persevere. Can you give us, shed a little more light on what I call this asceticism, this total personal discipline? It's almost abnormal.
Well, he's got, he is well disciplined, but it's also said that he is involved too much in detail. I think that's probably not fair. With some of the problems that a president has to solve, you need to understand the details. If you don't understand some of the details, you'll never be able to solve the problem. And the most recent example of that, I think, was the Camp David summit and our experience there. But he is a well-disciplined person, and he has tremendous amount of confidence. And I think you get confidence based on an understanding of your own strengths and also your own weaknesses. And he has a philosophical approach to problems. He'll get a problem or an issue, he'll study it, he'll master it, he'll weigh in the various factors, political, economic, otherwise, and he'll make a decision. And he'll be comfortable with that decision. And despite the criticism that he might get, or the controversial nature of the issue, or the difficulty that we might have getting legislation through the Congress. He is steadfast in pursuing his objective. And on one hand, people say, well, that results in him coming up with unrealistic approaches to problems. On the other hand, that determination and that commitment is what, first of all, got him to the White House and what's allowed him to be successful on some of these tough issues that have taken a long time. We mentioned the Middle East. Energy is another one, civil service reform. There were many times along the way when these different subjects looked lost, but it was his commitment and his confidence in himself to stick with these things that saw him through.
How did you view it from your end? Because when he was, quote, supposedly at the bottom of the polls in August, in point of fact, he had some unbelievable accomplishments. Panama, which was, there was no benefit in Panama for Jimmy Carter. And I recall telling him myself that this is all negative. Even if you win, it's a negative.
I remember that.
Then the Israeli, the sale of jets, the arms package, the problem with respect to Turkey, the embargo. These are three outstanding things that I can think of just offhand that he secured.
I think, Senator, what President Carter did, he came to Washington not to be a popular president, but to be a good president. And we could have shaped a modest strategy for dealing with these problems, and he chose not to. He shaped a bold strategy. And the reason that these issues have not been confronted, as you well know from your service here in the Senate, is because no president in recent years has had the political guts to take them on. We could have continued to let the situation in Central and Latin America deteriorate, not have a Panama Canal Treaty, possibly have another Vietnam there. President Carter chose not to. He took that tough issue on, as you said. We charted a new course in the Middle East that on one hand sustained our historic political and moral commitment to Israel's survival and security, but on the other hand we developed relationships with the moderate Arab states. That whole issue, I think, was symbolized in the vote on the arms to Saudi Arabia and Egypt. I'm confident that if we had not passed that vote, we would have not had Sadat's continued cooperation and would not have had a Camp David summit and the prospect
so
of peace. So
essentially winning that set the stage for
I believe that was a referendum at that point on our policy. So I think it's not to say that we've always been right, because as you know, we've made mistakes on a number of issues, but on those two issues certainly, his total commitment at the front end to chart a particular course and to see that issue through, I think, is why he's had some success in his presidency. We've also, as you probably know, we made a number of mistakes the first year and a half we were here, but I can't imagine any new president, any new team of people coming into government that wouldn't make some mistakes. Not having had federal experience, not having been in the Congress is certainly a disadvantage for him, but I think that's compensated for in other ways. I think he's got, as was demonstrated on the public works veto, I think he's got a closer sense of what the American people want on some of these issues.
Did he ever? On the public works side, you know, being chairman of and ranking on the energy and the environment and public works, I was very sensitive to that. And I think it's just an unusual victory for him. There's no question that there are excesses. It's almost impossible to put these packages together without them ballooning and ballooning.
Sure.
You know, the last guy's got to get on the train.
Sure.
And needs somebody to effect some kind of discipline. And it was done. You know, I would have thought that there'd have been a lot more acrimony than actually what took place. There's a certain really resignedness in the Congress that, well, you know, the president was tough, exercised his will, and I think he'll stand you in good stead in other negotiations.
It was important substantively. I think it was important symbolically. We don't like to have to get in a fight in the Congress with our friends, and we were on different sides with some of our good friends in both houses on this issue. But again, it was an example of an issue that the president felt strongly about.
I marvel at the professionalism, and here we deal primarily with Frank Moore and his team, Dan Tate and Bob Thompson. You know, I obviously don't agree with everything been with you on the big ones, but there are a lot of areas that I really have some concerns about, and yet one doesn't overlap the other. In other words, these people are very, very professional. I think handle their job very, very well. Let me ask you this. I think the Camp David deal is really one of the great accomplishments of our society, and you know, because that was a powder keg, and I've been always pessimistic about a solution, and for the first time in our lives, because of Sadat's actions, and now with Carter's leadership, we can be optimistic. I think good things are going to come. Whose idea was it for Camp David? Was it his own, or did this come about through?
It was his own. I think he. We had the Camp David summit was necessary not because the prospects for peace were so great, but because the prospects or probability that the negotiations were about to fall apart were so great. And I think President Carter realized that even a man as good and capable as Cy Vance, shuttling back and forth, could not bridge the gaps. There was too much, the whole negotiation was too much in the public domain. And because of some ominous signs through the summer, June and July, the political rhetoric back and forth between the Israelis and the Egyptians, the president realized that the best hope was to get those two men who he believed both wanted peace for their country together in a setting where they could have serious and protracted negotiations on these issues that divide them. Mike, I'd be the first to tell you that our expectation going into Camp David was very low. We would have considered it successful if we had just gotten both parties to agree to continue negotiations. But this reinforces, I think, the point I was making earlier about Jimmy Carter. He always shoots high, and he was not content to go into the Camp David meetings with just a low expectation that we would get them to agree to talk. He figured if I, as President of the United States, sitting down with President Sadat and Prime Minister Begin, if the three of us can't resolve these difficult problems, then there's very little chance they'll be resolved in the future at the foreign minister level or at the ambassadorial level. So he went in with the idea that certainly we were going to try to, as a minimal goal, keep the negotiations ongoing, but hopefully that we would have a breakthrough, and of course we did.
As advisors, yourself and Jerry and Frank and others, Stu, was there a sense that was conveyed to him as to the political downside risk for him personally in this undertaking?
We talked about it, but at that point it was the substantive consequences of not having a summit or not trying to keep the parties talking were so great that he never really considered the downside political risk. You know, the conventional wisdom, as you well know, is you don't have a summit unless something has been quietly agreed upon.
In fact, you were set up.
It was not that way at all.
You were set up on that, because I can recall the day after Henry Kissinger's statement very profusely saying that, my God, that he wouldn't have called this if he didn't have it set up.
It was a high-risk thing, and again, the president worked hard, and Prime Minister Begin and President Sadat, they both want peace, their people want peace. And President Carter proved to be, along with Secretary Vance, an effective mediator in negotiating some of these tough issues.
The thing that I came to first feel was the most important part of President Carter's policy, and still is, and I think it's the most important thing he's done in society because of what it's done to move society, is the moral tone that he's brought to the leadership. That, in my mind, was first epitomized by the human rights aspect of our foreign policy. I just feel personally that when you got a leader, he's got to be a moral leader in addition to a political leader, in addition to a governmental leader. And he gets a lot of flack around the world, you know, that double standard kind of stuff. I wonder if you might amplify a little bit your views of his personal attitude towards this human rights issue.
Yeah. Fortunately for the American people in the world, I have very little to do with foreign policy, but I'll try to present to you his views on the human rights dimension of his foreign policy as best I can. Basically, President Carter feels that if a people collectively represent any values, that it should be reflected in their foreign policy. And a president has, as you know from your experience in the Congress, president has a lot of limitations, a lot of restraints, a lot of political pressures that keep him from behaving unilaterally in a way that he might want to behave in foreign policy. But those things have to be balanced against basically the moral commitment of our country to human rights. And the president, this president feels that if our country stands for anything here and around the world, it's for basic human rights. And so we've pursued that policy vigorously. There are trade-offs. There are examples of that people will give you where our human rights is conflicted with maybe a more pragmatic need of our country. But I think maybe for the first time in a number of years, after Watergate, after Vietnam, I think for the first time in a long time that around the world our country is being correctly identified now with human rights as a basis for our foreign policy. I think the Panama Canal Treaty is a good example of that. That showed that we as a people and as a nation are strong enough and confident enough in our own strength and ability that we can treat a small country fairly in a negotiation. We negotiated a treaty that on one hand serves what I think are our best interests, but also fair to the people of Panama. And this doctrine of human rights has been applied, I think, in almost every instance. But it's not an absolute thing. It's a principle, and there are trade-offs and realistic sacrifices of policy that have to be made along the way. But I think time and time again the president has tilted in favor of the human rights dimension of his foreign policy. I think he's been true to that policy.
I think so too, very much. Speaking of his foreign policy, he's used Miss Lillian as an ambassador at large, or ambassador or secretary of state without portfolio or what have you. Would you have any comments? I know I'd be interested, I'm sure others would be, as to the relationship that Jimmy Carter views his mother in terms of a tool of effecting government policy.
Yeah, she's a strong woman, and if you look at President Carter as a human being and look at different strengths and weaknesses and personality traits, I think you see a lot of his mother's strength in his own background. At the age of 68, right in the middle of his gubernatorial campaign, she went to India and served in the Peace Corps for 2 years. She's a very unusual woman. She's a very sensitive woman, outspoken, and when she says something that the president listens. He's used her, as he has his wife Rosalind and other members of the family, to serve as goodwill ambassadors to other countries in the world. Ms. Carter went on a tour of, I think, 10 or 12 Latin American countries and had, I think for the first time, substantive talks with Latin American leaders, not trying to act as the president herself, but acting as a representative of the president. But one thing about Ms. Lillian, one thing that happened a month or so ago that was touching, I know, as far as the president was concerned. She went to Italy after the death of Aldo Moro to meet with the new president of Italy. And we got a cable back from our ambassador to Italy that described in really glowing terms the effect that Miss Lillian had had on the new president of Italy. And it almost brought a tear to the president's eye because he was so proud of his mother and the job that she had done in trying to convey to the new president of Italy, his feelings on behalf of the American people. So they have a close relationship.
It's got to be one of the most interesting families to
It is an
occupy.
interesting family.
Well, because you look at Billy Carter, who is in a sense a character.
Yeah.
You know that.
I don't think, I think he is a character.
What about his relationship with the president? I mean, what does the president say when he does some of the antics? And
He's never, I don't think he's ever tried to tell Billy how to conduct his personal life. If he did, it would probably have the opposite effect. But they're very close. They're very close. They're a close family, they're an unusual family.
and so independent.
Yeah, and very independent, very strong.
And his sister, of course.
She's strong and independent as well.
Such a missionary, isn't
Yeah.
he? Rosalind made a tour also in South America as ambassador without portfolio. Do you think that we'll be seeing more of her in the more official capacity than, you know, just a hostess.
Well,
But-
I think, Mike, I think you already have seen her doing things in addition to the traditional things that First Ladies have done. I think this president feels like she's capable of helping him in a number of ways. She's a very intelligent person. She's a fast learner and a very sensitive person. And when she goes somewhere and talks with people and analyzes the situation and comes back and has a comment for the president, he pays attention to it. So for him, she's an extension of himself and another person that can feed back into him ideas and thoughts about problems or the mood of the country or things that are troubling the American people.
But she's been active in ERA, and of course...
She's worked on the ERA extension, and she's been active in mental health. That was really one of her original interests when she was First Lady of Georgia. She spent the bulk of her substantive time working on mental health issues. She's interested in some of our urban programs. So she has an impact on his thinking. On the other hand, she does not present herself as being an expert on any of these subjects, but she's someone that the president listens to, who has a good common sense and judgment on problems.
Has the office changed in any degree?
No. Someone asked me the other day, had he changed since I first met him, and not in any dramatic way. There's a fairly significant difference in the way he spent his time the first year as president, the way he spends his time now.
Like what? How?
Well, when he came into office, as you know, the range of issues and problems that a president must face are just enormous, and there's no way to anticipate or really prepare for it. I suspect he thinks he came in well prepared for it, but you get here and you see the interrelationships between domestic and foreign policy issues and economic issues, and it's tough business being president. He spent a lot of time the first year he was in office learning the details of these different subjects. He knows a heck of a lot now about energy and a heck of a lot about the Middle East and a lot about NATO. Well, he didn't have that in-depth understanding when he came into office. So he spent a lot of his first year learning, you know, all of these subjects, and he worked longer hours the first year. First year he was in office, he might have gotten to work at 6:30 and knocked off at 5 or 6 and gone to the residence and had dinner with the family and come back and worked at 10 or 11 o'clock.
But that was true of the staff too. People were beaten.
He doesn't do that anymore though. He gets to work early, but he'll leave at 3 or 4 o'clock and maybe go play tennis, have supper with his family, maybe watch a movie with Amy or
Is he a good tennis player? Incidentally, that's my sport.
Pretty good. He's a good athlete. He obviously is competitive. He wouldn't be president. But you know, there's been a, you know, he's in a different phase of his presidency now. He's at a time when he can, where he's got this experience of this first year behind him, and he's current on issues that maybe he knew not a lot about when he first went into office. So he's more relaxed, and more confident, and obviously I think he's a better president than he was the first day.
How do you view the relationships with the Congress at this point?
Well, as you know, there's been a lot written about it that suggests the relationships are not good. I think we have excellent relationships. And I think what you have to do is look at the record that's been accomplished by this president and this Congress working together. You're a good example. You've supported us on a lot of our big issues, but there have been other issues where you've seen things a different way. But we feel that we've got a fair hearing from the Congress and that we have a good record to show for the 2 years we've been here. We've had a number of successes in the foreign policy area. We've talked about the Panama Canal treaties. We also passed the Mideast arms package. We lifted the Turkish arms embargo. Domestically, we've got civil service reform and energy and a number of other pieces of legislation that are significant, and I think we've got a good working relationship. We've made some mistakes in our dealings with Congress, but I think those are the mistakes that a new president and a new team of people made. I feel like we've gotten good support from the leadership. But I think the nature of because President Carter is tackling these tough issues and because the solutions to these issues are controversial, I suspect we'll have a lot of debate, a lot of rhetoric back and forth. But I think the record is really impressive. How do you feel?
Same way. I think that I think it got off to a better start than what was reported. I never really understood particularly against Frank Moore, a lot of comments, well, he wasn't liked. I didn't know anybody didn't like him. He was very attentive. You'd call up, and it was,
Well, I think what happened to Frank, every time that I would do something, for example, that might offend some member of the Congress, Frank was blamed for it, and Frank became pretty much the whipping boy for the administration. And we made, the president, certainly myself and other members, we made a number of mistakes in dealing with the Congress. But I think Frank was
he's lived through it and he's gained weight.
Sure. And we've got strengths and weaknesses on the White House staff, but there's no unit of the White House office that's any stronger than Frank Moore's.
You've picked up some strength. I think additions of Sarah Weddington is really more your style of the type of person. I've had occasion to deal with her, and when you selected her, we dealt with her at Department of Agriculture. And she's a very fine lady and very, very bright, and I think it'll stand you in good stead. What about, I think people are interested in the reaction with respect to the media, and I know we don't have much time left, but I'll serve you that one in a minute.
I don't know how much time we have left, but it's certainly not enough time to talk
Maybe it's
about
safer to leave that for just a minute.
No, I don't. I think it's, historically, there's probably never been a president or a president's staff that thinks the media has been as good to their boss as they should be. We want the media to focus on all the grand things that we have done, and their natural inclination is to pick out the mistakes and the shortcomings. But by and large, I think the press coverage of the administration has been fair. There have been some people that have done an excellent job in covering the president, and some people have done a poor job. Most of it has been somewhere in between. People in the press are probably like the people at the White House or in the Congress or in business or working people. There's some that do a good job, some that do a poor job. But I think by and large, the treatment of the media of this president has been fair. I think to the extent, now having said that, to the extent that I would fault them, I felt like 8 or 9 months into the first year, they were saying, well, Carter promised this and Carter promised that, and where is it? We said that these things, we would try to do these things in 4 years, and they started passing, I think, early and premature judgment on the president. But other than that, that would be my only criticism.
Good. Hamilton, I really want to thank you for joining me. I'm sure the people of Alaska are very grateful for this opportunity to get some insight into the workings of the White House and your personal appraisal of this most unusual person, this great person who's President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. Thank you again.
Oh, Seth, I enjoyed being here.
Good. Thank you for watching.